Hello everybody and welcome to today's edition of the UKEndZone Football Daily Podcast. Welcome back to another week of the Football Daily Podcast with myself, Oliver Connolly, and joining me today to discuss all the biggest stories in the world of football, be it Brady Hoke, be it the Pittsburgh Steelers, be it Geno Smith and Michael Vick with the New York Jets, is Tom Roper, our featured write-up on UKEndZone.com. Tom, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's going to be a good week of the Daily Pod. We got a ton of guests. Tom's going to come and join us for a couple of days to discuss some stuff. The boss man, the editor, David Bosley, will be returning to the podcast at some point this week, so get excited for that one. But Tom, it was a major weekend of football action. There was football here in the UK at Wembley Stadium. We will discuss that and all the ramifications for the Oakland Raiders and maybe the Miami Dolphins as well. And then there was also maybe one of the biggest head coaching derelict in duty situations we've had in some time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's start there. Let's start with Brady Hoke. This guy to me is, I don't understand how he's still got a head coaching job with results on the field, and this was still an on-field situation that filtered off the field. Essentially, for those who do not know, Brady Hoke, head coach of the Michigan Wolverines, the University of Michigan, left his quarterback Shane Morris in a game when he was blatantly concussed. He could barely walk. He looked like a box who was just survived the 10 count, and he left him on the field to play another down where he completed a pretty nice pass, but the guy could barely see, could barely move. Give me your feelings on the situation.
Yeah, it was horrific, and it's not the first time it's happened for Brady Hoke either, is it? Because I think it was in 2004 when he was Ball State's head coach. They were doing a coaching session in sub-zero temperatures. A player got frostbite, and then he got reprimanded by the athletic director for that. Him and another coach who's now at Michigan as well. I watched the game back yesterday, and you can clearly see he looks punch drunk, and the behaviour had all the symptoms of a concussion. From what I understand, their review was more sort of based on how they interpret it rather than sort of anything. The medical testing was supposed to follow and actually force them to make these decisions. It was a complete and utter shambles, and like you say, this problem now added to the on-field results. I think it's 9 losses in his last 13 games now. I'm amazed he's still got a job. I'm absolutely amazed, and I cannot see how he's going to survive now. I'll be amazed if he sees this season out, much let alone gets into next year.
Yeah, we could run through the press conference, which would be fun and nice to do and stuff, but today's press conference was a shambles. He basically put a lot of the blame on the young fella. I was stunned with that. He said, it's not up to me to decide who goes in the game. It's up to the doctors and to the players. He's the head coach. You got to have some responsibility. You really do. Maybe the medical staff didn't see that he went down the way he did. You were watching the game. You should have called for the staff and even just take the guy out for a play. That's all we're asking here. He left him for the next play. Then they subbed him out for Devin Gardner. Shocking decision for a guy who's under so much pressure, just a ridiculous error in judgment. And I would never say that Brady Hoke would intentionally put a guy out there who had a concussion and he would leave him out there with a concussion. I don't think he would do that. I don't think any coach would do that. I really don't. But to not have your finger on the pulse of the situation is shocking to me. To not see. He was watching it. You could see him watching it. He talked to the guy. The guy ran back out to the huddle. It's unbelievable. Yeah,
absolutely. The decision rests with him. The guys around him, the medical staff, his other coaching staff are there to give him the advice. They're there to fill in their respective roles. But the final decision rests with him at the end of the day. I don't buy into any of that in the press conference, that it's up to the medical staff. He can make that final decision. We saw it happen with the Cleveland Browns a couple of years ago when Colt McCoy got concussed, similar sort of circumstances there. It was quite clear that, take him out, like you say, at least for a series. You can't take these kind of risks. And what it says to me as well is that Brady Hoke, no, I don't think, he would intentionally do anything. You find it hard to believe that any head coach would. But, he's that desperate. He's that in the situation he's in at the moment where, he's making these kind of mistakes, these kind of awful decisions. And it's just, I'm kind of amazed it hasn't cost him his job already. And I think, he really is a dead man walking now.
Yeah, he really isn't. The guy just looked dumb in today's press conference. That's the nicest way you can put it. He just looked stupid. Some of the quotes were, guys play injured all the time. Yeah, we're talking about head trauma here. We're talking about the biggest thing in football right now, which could cost the sport its future, is what we're talking about. And we're not talking about pro athletes here. Again, we're not talking about paid professionals. We're talking about a guy who's there on a scholarship, trying to get some sort of academic future from the University of Michigan, and having his life endangered by a stupid head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an important issue at the moment, one that's got huge legal ramifications for the sport as a whole as well. And you just can't see the sense and the thinking behind it. And, like you say, the press conference today, fumbled his way through it, much like he's fumbling his way through coaching the team. He doesn't resonate as a very good coach anyway and as a very good leader. This coupled with that, how can you leave the guy in the job? I don't see how you can, even if Michigan has a better outcome of the game, I think, this is so overriding at this point. So I just don't see him getting out the other side of it. And it's starting to build anyway, isn't it? I mean, you've got all the stories circulating now that they want John Harbaugh to come in as head coach there. So it's already starting to build towards him, his dismissal. I just think it'll be a question now really of when rather than if.
Yeah, they have it's $2.5 million to fire him right now, $2 million at the end of the season. Yeah. No point, save yourself $500,000 and use it as the compensation package to go and get your next guy. But is any school, any fan base right now more delusional than the University of Michigan? And I actually love that school. That might be my second school. I'm a big fan of that school, but I'm looking at the list of candidates that their fan sites are writing about, that their SB Nation sites are writing about, and I see John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, I see big name after big name, I see Kevin Sumlin from Texas A&M. Are you kidding me? I don't care how much Michigan pays. No one's leaving the SEC to go to the Big 12 outside of maybe Mullen at Mississippi State, which I think would be a decent hire. That's the sort of place you have to look at. No one is leaving the NFL right now to go to Michigan. You can quote me on that. I believe that as a fact. There's no chance Jim Harbaugh, we discussed this the other week, he will not leave the NFL without having at least competed for another Super Bowl. He will not do it. He can't have his brother do it. And why on earth would John Harbaugh lead the Baltimore Ravens for the University of Michigan? What a stupid thing to come out and write. How dumb is that?
Yeah, that was bizarre to me. I mean, even with his Michigan connections, it's just,
who cares?
For all loyalty doesn't really, that doesn't really count in that situation. I totally agree with you. I think, whether that story may be circulated because John Harbaugh might be under a little bit of pressure at Baltimore at the moment with everything that's gone on there in the last, 6 or 7 months. But I don't think, I certainly can't see him being fired from that job anytime soon, and I will be amazed to see him quit to go and coach in college football, not least of all in the Big Ten at the moment. And at Michigan, I think, the only coach who was ever likely to leave the SEC on that matter to go to the Big Ten was James Franklin, and he's already done that. So, no, I can't see that happening at all.
This thing that schools have to employ someone with ties to the community, I almost understand it because of the recruiting aspect, but Brady Hoke's a Michigan man. Look how that's worked out. Get the best guy for the job. Find the best man for the job. Guess what? Penn State needed a reboot after Bill O'Brien left. They went and got the best man available in James Franklin. It's going to do wonders for them long term. Find the best man. Who cares about where he comes from? Who cares he went to high school in Ann Arbor? Who cares?
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I mean, the reasons behind James Franklin's hiring, to do with the recruiting, the way they felt he could coach these players up, more so than anything to do with the fact that he graduated from Penn State, which was something, the media focused on. But if you watch his first press conference back, the focus from the athletics director and the focus from the board was very much on what James Franklin can give us as a football coach rather than anything to do with something that happened 20 years ago. It's great that he understands Penn State football and he knows the place well, but that doesn't count for anything when he's standing on the sideline at the end of the day.
All right, then, let's go to the NFL, because I get very irate with this Michigan situation at the moment, particularly with that man Brady Hoke. Let's talk about the New York Jets. This is another thing that really gets me annoyed, and I've seen this on Twitter all day to the point where I won't even look at it anymore, because it's so ridiculous to me that it's even a conversation of whether to start Geno Smith or Michael Vick. And I feel for the first time since I've ever done any sort of podcast or writing or anything, it's the first time I've ever felt sorry for Rex Ryan. That team is an absolute joke. The team is a shambles. They have zero offensive talent outside of Geno trying to make plays, and now they're calling for a second-year quarterback's head for a guy who's over the hill for a long time in Michael Vick, whose only thing, and by the way, he's also turnover prone. His only thing has been athleticism. That's clearly dwindled. And it's a team that's being governed by its fans. It's shocking to me. Whenever would the New England Patriots take in the fans' advice to start or sit anyone? When would the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA, one of the best run organizations in sports history, listen to a fan over starting Thiago Splitter? Never. Why the heck do the Jets do it? And they wonder why they're the Jets.
I totally agree with you. I think, I was someone last year who felt Geno really struggled, but he's impressed me at the start of the season. Like you said, I think he's really tried to make some plays. like you say, there's no weapons there. You know, the other side of the football, the secondary is a complete joke. So, you know, defensively they can't hold, they can't win any possession downs. You know, for me, you know, Michael Vick, you know, this is a guy who never really fulfilled his potential in the first place. You know, the fans, the treatment yesterday of Geno Smith, with them chanting for Vic, you know, that's not going to help your football team. I'm not surprised Geno flipped with one fan. I don't agree with that. And that's not the first time that's happened there in the Jets either. I think it was a couple of years ago where Rex Ryan did a similar thing with a fan. You know, you can see the frustration. It's not helping anybody. And, you know, I think that, you know, I like that Rex Ryan is sticking behind Geno Smith, and he really is sticking behind him. Every opportunity he gets to vocally back him, he takes it. He doesn't care about the media reaction, the fans' reaction to that. You know, he's trying to build something there and trying to get that going. I think a lot of their problems, you know, they've been in some close games this season, and I don't all put it down at the door with Geno Smith. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see where they go. You know, listening to the fans. I mean, fans, you know, naturally are going to be very emotional about things, and they're going to, you know, when things go wrong, they want to see instant change. We see this in Pittsburgh week in, week out with Todd Haley. You know, it's, at the end of the day, the long-term future there, they've got to build around somebody really, and for me, that's Geno Smith. You know, Michael Vick, I don't think he's got it anymore, to be honest with you. Anyway, you know, he might be able to come in for a couple of series, you know, in certain situations within games. But, you know, stick with the kid. You know, he's shown some sort of progression this year, some development. He's trying to make some things happen and just try and build around him. You know, they've got to draft a bit better, I think, and look more at free agency and what they can do there.
Yeah, I completely. And we know they're going to go into free agency this year, and Cousin Ndamukong Suh says essentially in a backhanded way he's coming to New York, so Giants and Jets, clear your cap space, get ready for me. They will probably end up signing Ndamukong Suh, and it's going to kill them offensively once again. If I was the New York Jets, I would literally release Michael Vick today. I don't know what it costs you to do that. If it's a free on the cap hit and things of that nature, I would do it. It's become more trouble than it's worth, and we've seen this with them time and time again. It's a very similar situation to Mark Sanchez and Tim Tebow. It really is. Sanchez went to back-to-back AFC Championship games. He was turnover prone. Because guess what? Most of the guys in the league are turnover prone. They really are. You just got to get through stretches where they do and try and fight and battle your way through it. And they're doing the exact same thing by bringing in a superstar, quote-unquote, backup quarterback, as backup quarterbacks go, in Michael Vick, which is a complete circus, and which means that 3 quarters into the first game of the year, they're chanting for him. It's obscene. And he by the way, he also isn't a good player. And the last time he took to the field, he was just a flat-out bad player, and has always been as turnover-prone as Geno is right now. And Geno will always be turnover-prone, but he will make more plays at this stage of his career than Michael Vick will, with zero offensive talent.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Let's talk about...
I mean, look back at last season as well, the last half of last season, you know, Geno Smith came on really, really well. You know, I don't understand what the fans there think has happened over the off-season. He's gone back so far the other way that they now feel they need to make this reactionary change.
And it's also only his second year, and both Manning brothers were dreadful in their first 2 years. People just don't have any patience anymore, particularly in that city, and there's a reason why that franchise is still struggling and will continue to struggle when they are as haphazard and make such quick decisions as they are doing. Let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. I was stunned watching that game last night. I don't know about you, I don't know if you stayed up to watch it, you watched it this morning, however the listeners watched it, or at least when they got the news, you must have been just stunned, because I'm watching the Cowboys and I was thinking to myself, they need to call a perfect offensive game, which Scott Linehan has done a couple of times this year. They need DeMarco Murray to stay healthy. They need to dominate the clock. They need to take the play clock to within 5 seconds on every single play. And Roman needs to make throws when they get press coverage on the outside to win this ball game. And they need Breeze to have a bit of an off night. And everything clicked for them, and everything that they should have done, they did do. And we don't often say that about the Cowboys in prime time. And I was really impressed by them.
Yeah, I watched the game, and it was perfect. It was picture perfect on offense. I think that offensive line they've got there as well is certainly the best young offensive line in the league, if not the best offensive line in the league. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, you know, DeMarco Murray did a good job of protecting the football. You know, he went up the middle a bit more as well. He used the guys in front of him a lot better than he has in previous weeks, where, you know, since the injury he had was the couple of start of last season, the season before, where he sort of had a tendency after that to sort of try and get out to the sideline more because he didn't want to take the hit. You know, he got in behind that offensive line. You know, they ran the clock really well. It looked a very well coached game. Roman made some really nice throws. You know, great ability to extend the play, and everything was on the money for them. It was a really sound performance, and against a really good team in New Orleans Saints as well. I know they've got issues at the moment on defense, but they're in prime time on Sunday night. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Real positive sign for that organisation.
I thought they were really good. The thing that impressed me the most away from their offense was fantastic. They just clicked perfectly. Tony Romo goes for 262, 3 touchdowns. He couldn't have been much better. But defensively, even if you aren't that talented, if you can get people to rush the passer slightly, which is always difficult to do, and maybe you find different ways to do it, you bring in some stunts, you don't just play straight up, as some of these poor organizations still try and do. But if you can just, once the ball's in play, corral to the football and leave a mark on people, that's all I think you can ask from these guys. And I'm watching the Saints play, and Jimmy Graham was missing for most of that game. But when anyone did get the ball, running the ball or catching the ball, they had 3 or 4 guys draped all over them. And these aren't big name players, and these are limited in talent players because of the way they've abused the salary cap in Dallas. And yet they're flying to the football and they're trying to punch it out and trying to just force turnovers and just being really aggressive on defense. I think that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, they were very physical. They closed down to the ball quickly. They had a number of stops on third down. And yeah, the defense, really, like I say, it seemed a really well coached game for them. And, exactly what they'd want to see from a big game like that as well. It really it will definitely lift them. And I think, the Cowboys, it's hard not to think they're just going to have another 8-8 year. But if they can just get 2-3 more performances out of the season like that, there is every chance in that division that it's going to be enough to win it. And then once you're into the postseason, you're starting again, and it opens up. The confidence will lift. The players are going to feel more of a unit than I think that they do when they come off the back of another 8-8 year, and they're staring at starting again almost with a bit of a blank script, really. But that offensive line for me, that's really key, because they did such a good job last night. And, if they can continue to do that throughout the rest of the year, they might just have half a chance.
I agree, and they've drafted that group really well. They've not drafted great everywhere else, but that group's been spectacular and invested first-round picks in it, and took a lot of criticism for not drafting guys like Johnny Manziel, not drafting another quarterback the year before, Geno sliding, we're taking Travis Frederick, one of the surest things in the draft. And he's already a stud at center, one of the best in the league as a second-year guy. They've invested in it. They invested the contracts in Smith. They've done a great job along there, and you have to give credit to the Cowboys when we take shots at them all the time, when they do something really well, like assemble that offensive line, which was always the bedrock of those great teams they've had for many decades. It was always the Great Wall, the big offensive line. It was just, that's always been the MO of the Cowboys outside of Irvin and Staubach and Aikman. It's been that offensive line. They seem to have tried to go back to those roots.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've got to take your hat to Jerry Jones there. Yeah, they got Smith's got to be one of the best tackles in the game, certainly the best young tackle in the game. And yeah, Travis Frederick and Doug Free. I think it's a really good line there. And they used Jason Witten in it as well. I especially noticed that last night. So yeah, be interesting to see how they continue on for the rest of the season. Be interesting to see how they do at Wembley when they come over to play the Jaguars. It certainly lifted the fan base. That much I did notice.
Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. It really, really interested me, and I thought they were really impressive offensively. I went back and watched some of their games this weekend. You watch a team that has as much talent as they do on the offensive side of the ball when you have the most talented quarterback in the league. Jordy Nelson is one of the best players in the league. Randall Cobb, who's always an X factor. And you have Eddie Lacy, who I'm not sold on long term, but I think for the first 3 years he'll be a stud. And yet they were very vanilla to begin with. You're talking just 11 personnel for all 3 first games. And then they come into this weekend, they open the playbook up a bit more. Aaron Rodgers looked more comfortable. He told everyone in Wisconsin to relax. I think they took heed of him, and he always goes against Chicago and just plays exceptionally well. And I could never see him doing poorly 4 weeks in a row, but he went above and beyond, I thought, this week. They were fantastic.
Yeah, they were really, really good. Yeah, like you say, they opened up the playbook a bit more. He looked genuinely back to more sort of like his old self of those, being able to hit those tight windows. And, everybody just looked more in sync. The coaching looked a lot better. I think, I think the Bears were certainly disappointing for me. They put up a lot of yards of offense, but they couldn't, defensively, they couldn't seem to get a stranglehold on it. And I think, the element of that there is that, when the Packers play as well as they can on offense like that, and when Aaron Rodgers is at the height of his game, that's really for me where they start to look unbeatable. And I think that's why, that's certainly from my perspective why I tipped them for the Super Bowl this year, because I genuinely thought if that offense gets going and it stays going and everybody stays healthy, they can outlast teams, they can outscore teams. And I think, particularly in the NFC, that's key to have a quarterback like that, with some great defenses that you're going to face. Just a question of whether or not they can keep it up and stay with this and build consistency, because the first 3 weeks of the season were really quite bizarre for them.
Yeah, my issue with them still offensively is they still rely on the same guys. They used to go much deeper, and Randall Cobb would not be a starting wide receiver, and that's a nice X factor to have. And when the majority of your offense is split through the 4 guys I just mentioned, it's basically the entire offense. Devontae Adams got some touches, Rodgers caught a touchdown, the tight end. But outside of that, they only use those 4 guys, and that can be an issue going forward, particularly when you face a team. And I don't want Packers fans to get too carried away because there was just zero pass rush. I didn't see anyone get in the backfield all day. Jared Allen was out, and that was a major loss for Chicago. They're in real trouble. Do you think for Chicago, most of the blame goes to not getting a pass rush and not being inventive enough on defense, knowing you don't have the players? Or do you put it down to the fact that they couldn't punch it in the red zone and hang with Green Bay when they knew they wouldn't have a pass rush, and Jay Cutler had 2 turnovers, had 2 interceptions and fumbled the ball twice as well?
Yeah, no, I think the defense, I think the pass rush was mainly to blame. It really struggles. They did a better job of stopping the run, but they couldn't really get any pressure to Rodgers. What did they have? 1 sack in the game? Mm-hmm. That's against the Green Bay Packers and against Aaron Rodgers in particular. That's you're always going to struggle in a big game like that. So yeah, I think, that was a big part of the reason that they struggled. And, if you don't get pressure up front against even the mediocre quarterbacks, they're going to have a chance to put up numbers on you. You don't get it against a quarterback like Rodgers, and there's every chance you're going to lose the game.
The Oakland Raiders came to London. They were unceremoniously undressed by the Miami Dolphins, and they were beaten down in a real bad way. I thought Tannehill was terrific, by the way, in that game. Looked superb, particularly through the first half. But the Raiders interest me more as a storyline coming out of this, because we had the report last night from the AP writer who said essentially Dennis Allen's been fired, and then 2 hours later deletes the tweet and just says, "I lied," essentially is what he said. I don't think he expected it to get out as big as it did do. Will Dennis Allen be fired soon, and should he be fired? We spoke the other week, and I said, look, just get a new voice in there, and that's my first thought when I saw the story. They're just saying, let's get a new voice to carry us through to the end of the season, yet it seems like they don't have the stones or whatever to actually pull the trigger.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's every chance he will be fired. I'm not necessarily sure. I don't think it's going to solve their problems, because I think their main problems are in terms of decision making at the top of the tree, which falls on Reggie McKenzie. I think, I don't, Dennis Allen for me, they look like he lacks leadership. Mike Carlson brought up a good point last night during the coverage of the Cowboys game, in which he said that when Derek Carr was injured during the game, sort of like nobody helped him off to the sideline. Nobody seemed to even sort of check if he was okay. They just sort of pulled Matt McGloin and sort of sent him straight in there. And, for me, the Raiders, they really are a mess at the top, to be honest with you. I think, you look again at offensively, they lack weapons, they lack talent, they lack depth. The offensive line's a complete joke. The wide receivers are a huge issue for them and has been for some time now. And I know James Jones has done okay. For me, he's not a number 1 guy. And, Dennis Allen, they came out and they started that game very well yesterday, and they had a good opening drive. So, but me, the Raiders do that quite a lot, and it's starting to feel just like it's that sort of like first drive fluke, with the opposition still sort of settling into the game. And then once things sort of right themselves and it balances out, the Dolphins just totally took the game away from them. And I think the Dolphins were fantastic on offense. They seem to run a lot of the similar sort of passing patterns to the ones they ran against the Patriots in week 1, and it worked well for them. But, the Raiders, I think Dennis Allen, I think, there's every chance he's a dead man walking too as well. But I'm not necessarily sure it might be the right decision to go and get somebody else and to get him out of the organisation. But I think Reggie McKenzie should be going with him. Yeah,
I think McKenzie will be gone as well. This will come from Marcus at the top of the Raiders tree up there in terms of the owner. It's one of those situations where it smacks me now where it's like, should we save some compensation money by not letting him go yet? Why do it? Let's just wait. But I would just promote Tony Sparano. Allen to me doesn't even look like he's the coach anyway. When you watch them, he's not saying anything on the sideline. He doesn't look like he's doing anything. Really bizarre situation to be in. It's difficult to judge him because he's never had any talent. And you just mentioned there, we could go through every position group and you would find a hole. You could not name one position group in the Oakland Raiders where you say that's a strength, even of their team. And if you put it on another team, there's only one player on that roster that I can really find where I'd say I'd want him if I was a contender in my starting 11, and that's maybe Khalil Mack, and that would only be in a sub package. They have no talent, and that's an issue. A coach can't coach without talent. So I feel harsh putting too much of the blame on Dennis Allen. Most of it's on Reggie McKenzie. They have to find a way. Every contract they signed this summer, when they didn't give that money to Lamar Houston, and they didn't give it to Veltier, two guys in their prime, all those other contracts they gave to Maurice Jones-Drew and Schaub and all these guys, they have to find a way to get out with them after 1 year. Find a way to bring that cap money back in. And I think what they need to stop doing, Tom, is stop giving inflated contracts to like 3 guys, when they go with Jones-Drew and Schaub and these different things. I would package all that money. And I think it's worth overpaying by a ton to say, Ndamukong Suh's going to be available. Let's give this a shot. Let's stop going for over-the-hill veterans. Let's parlay 2 of the major contracts together. And if we're going to dig ourselves into a hole, let's do it with one guy who we think is an all-pro player. I would go down that route. That's the only way they can do it, because they can't just attract free agents anyway, and they're already overpaying for everyone. Package some of those overpaid deals and go for one all-pro player.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. The total lack of talent and depth on, like you say, every position for them is just, and they've got a rookie quarterback now there in Derek Carr, who's got no one to throw the football to. He's got 2 injury-prone running backs in McFadden and Jones-Drew behind him. It really does. It stinks there. And, I do feel sorry for Dennis Allen, because I just think, the expectation, and, much like with Jets, Raiders fans are all calling to fire Dennis Allen, but you don't see, somehow Reggie McKenzie seems to skip out of the argument.
He really does. I wrote a column about this last year where it's just constantly, in Reggie we trust, and they never look past what Reggie McKenzie does, and he'll be gone at the end of the season. And like we said the other day, again, I keep repeating that we did that pod the other day, I thought it was one of our best with the coaching carousel, predicting it already in 2015. They've got to find a guy and just give him complete control. Just go down the Pete Carroll route, go down the Bill Belichick route, have a general manager in who's there to make the deals, but let one guy pick all the players, pick all the pieces, try and build something pretty good, and go and try and attract Jim Harbaugh, go and try and attract Rob Ryan, and give them full control. Let's talk about your Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm just going to let you go at this and give me your impressions on what happened for Pittsburgh, because they should have won that game, and they should not be allowing Mike Glennon on the come-from-behind drive with, under a minute to go?
Yeah, it really was just an abysmal game for the Steelers last night in the respects of how we threw it away. I mean, the first thing is obviously the penalties. You're going to beat yourself with 125 yards on 13 penalties, 6 of those being 15 yards or more. I mean, Mike Tomlin gets up there after the game and says, we've got to find a way of fixing this. To be honest with you, that's starting to sound like deja vu, because I can't lost count of the numbers of weeks over this season already and last season where he's gone out to a press conference after the game and had to say that. For me as well, defensively, much like with Chicago Bears, no pass rush. Pass rush was virtually non-existent yesterday, bar a couple of quarterback pressures. We got 1 sack, which was Arthur Motes, I think. Even when we did get to Glennon, he had just enough time to make the throw, and that was only on a couple of occasions. I think defensively, one of the big issues for me is cornerback. This is a position that we struggled with last year. We struggled with it with guys who could tackle consistently. We got busted in a lot of coverages. We gave up a lot of big passing plays. Any quarterback who was dual threat that we faced, or any team that used read option, we bit on all of those, and it really cost us. We didn't go and get a cornerback in the draft this year, bar Shaquille Richardson, who was quite clearly going to be designated for the practice squad, which is where he's ended up. In a talented cornerback draft, I thought. And, for me, Cortez Allen, who's now our number 1 cornerback, now that Ike Taylor's out injured, the guy isn't worth a cent of the contract extension we gave him. I think it was $26.5 million spread across 4 or 5 years. Keenan Lewis left in 2012 to go to New Orleans. He's proved himself as a shutdown corner, which is exactly what we wanted in the long term to replace Ike Taylor. We were assured that Cortez Allen, that's where he was going to progress. That's who we were sticking behind, and it's not working. He has been really, really bad, Cortez Allen. And the guys behind, Willie Gay and Bryce McCain, those are guys are not going to give you consistency at that position. The secondary looks older, it looks slower, it lacks depth, no pass rush up front. a lot, Dick LeBeau overthinking things all the time, a lot of young players trying to learn a complicated defensive system, and it's getting us beat. And yeah, things aren't perfect on offense by any means, but I've seen progression in the offense, whereas I haven't seen any progression in the defense, and that's where it's costing us. But the penalties are just, they're absurd, and they show a lack of discipline. And I love Mike Tomlin. I think he's a fantastic head coach, and I would never call for his head as far as having an 0-16 season. But I have to admit, he has to take some responsibility there because, he is the head coach. And at the end of the day, when you're having penalties like that and you have guys whose tackling technique is poor, he's got to step in and take control of that.
Yeah, let's just paint this as it is and let's be honest about this. I don't think Mike Tomlin should be gone. He's too good a coach to do that. But he's been abysmal for the last 2 years. He just has. Let's be real about this because they've had discipline issues for 2 years straight. They've given out contracts to a guy like a Troy Polamalu who shouldn't be anywhere near the team right now. And God love Troy, but the guy is just dreadful in coverage and doesn't have the same explosion as he used to have. And people will see the vine and things of him jumping the play against Tennessee. Great. That's one in 1,000 snaps. You want to roll with that as a starting safety? Good luck with that. And Dick LeBeau, again, God love him, Hall of Famer, should be first ballot, should be a walk off the podium retirement sort of guy. But Mike Tomlin has to sit down and realize that maybe if this is who Dick's trusting and this is the system, it's not working out, and we maybe have to make an adjustment and stop saying Dick will just tell me if he's coming back. There's no way to run an organization in this day and age. Yes, it's the Steelers. Yes, they're different. Mike Tomlin has to get a grip of this thing real fast because the discipline's dreadful. And defensively, they got old and slow under his watch, and they need to find a way to figure out. But he is the guy, in my opinion, to figure that out. You splice up the pie for me, because I think Steelers fans give a lot of people a lot of passes, and I think that's fair enough because of the things they've done in the game. Ben Roethlisberger, to me, is the most underappreciated guy in the NFL, but he is the guy who came out in that interview in the first week of the season and said, I call 99% of the plays when we go no huddle. So if he's taken the credit, he has to take some of the responsibility, and yet Haley gets all the flack. When Roethlisberger came out and said, I call the plays in the no-huddle system, which is half of the system, and he takes the credit and doesn't get any of the stick when it doesn't go right. Then you have Polamalu, who's an all-time great, so he doesn't get any stick, and Tomlin gets seemingly a free pass, as does LeBeau. So you slice up the cake for me. How should we divvy out that blame?
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, and I'm glad you brought up that point about Ben, actually. Todd Haley is putting it generously, is a Marmite guy in Pittsburgh. More likely, he's mostly hated by everybody, myself not actually included in that. Ben, for me, there's big swarms of Steelers fans who really, to be honest with you, just totally switch off to the idea that he can do anything wrong. Whenever he strikes a poor pass, and red zone accuracy is an issue for him, whenever he makes a poor throw, whether it's picked off or not, the blame is instantly laid at Todd Haley's door. Ben, no, he can't do anything wrong. And that's not to say, he's a terrific playmaker. He does things that no other quarterback could do in this league, and he is, he's the heart and soul of this team in many respects. But for me, like you say, he says he calls, 99% of those plays in the no huddle. Well, we have had mistakes on offense this year with throws to make. The one at the Cleveland Browns, he threw into tight coverage. There are, certain situations. I mean, there was criticism yesterday with the final drive before the Bucs' final drive, our final drive of the game, where we didn't throw it out. I think we were in our own 20 and we went for 3 running plays. We were trying to control the clock at that point a little bit, Also very wary of the fact that, we were pretty limited in terms of what we could actually do from that position on the field. I think, with the Steelers, I think it's time to, Mike Tomlin's got to wrestle some control back. It does have a feel that he's not completely in command of things there, and that's showing up with the lack of discipline in the team. For me, Dick LeBeau, I think he's done. I think he probably should have gone last year. And I think probably the worst decision the Steelers can make if he does go at the end of this season is to promote Keith Butler. Nothing against Keith Butler, but Butler's from the Dick LeBeau school of coaching. So all we're going to do is bring in, his successor, and he's going to be a younger version, probably younger, not so good version of him. We're going to have to, maybe go outside the franchise, but that's not something typically the Steelers do. They tend to bring in guys who have close connections to Pittsburgh, and Todd Haley's dad was a coach there. So, there is that feeling of concern that even if LeBeau does go, the job will just get passed on to Butler anyway.
I think Tomlin should just make himself the defensive coordinator, bring in some defensive assistants, and that's how you really try to grab some control back in your organization. Dominate one side of the ball. If you're not going to dominate the other side, He won't do it offensively. Try and wrestle back full control with the Steelers defense, which is basically the thing the Steelers is built on, is that defense. That's how he wrestles back some control. And if you want to bring in one of these younger guys, maybe that's a good decision. Do it. And by the way, it's unfair on anyone because 99.9% of people you bring in wouldn't be anywhere close to being a young Dick LeBeau because that's how special the guy is. These guys are difficult to replace. And the issue with Todd Haley is he's not Bruce Arians, and we see with Bruce Arians, he's one of the best offensive minds in football. It's pretty simple. He's like in the top 10, I'd say, in all of football. It's difficult to replace that guy. It's not easy.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And offensive coordinator's been a tough role in Pittsburgh anyway, because I remember after the Super Bowl loss to the Green Bay Packers, Steelers fans will deny it now, but I can remember them calling in their swarms for Bruce Arians' head after that game, even though some of those play calls were on Ben, particularly the interception. So I've always felt as a Steelers fan, it's a little bit of a poison chalice in Pittsburgh, to be honest with you, that offensive coordinator position. I mean, I like some of the things Todd Haley's done. I like we got the running game back. I like the idea of getting the ball out of Ben's hands a bit quicker. He's done some positive things. There's been some negative stuff as well. I don't really understand first play of the game yesterday, for example, why you want to set the tempo early at home and you throw a quick screen to Will Johnson, the fullback. That didn't really make any sense to me. And there's plays like that where you think, what's he doing? But then, you look at it and I don't think we were in no huddle at that point. But then you see stuff that does. It gives you an idea that there is progression going on there. We did do a better job of protecting Ben last year, even with an 8-8 season. So, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I think, one name I have seen circulated as a possible replacement for Dick LeBeau is Raheem Morris, but I don't know if that'll happen, to be honest with you.
Alright, then a couple more storylines I want to hit just before we get out of here. The first one is the 49ers game against the Philadelphia Eagles. Neither team I thought looked particularly great, and the 49ers somehow won this game, which they had to win. Were you more impressed with the 49ers or more disappointed with the Eagles?
More disappointed with the Eagles. I think the 49ers haven't had enough individual talent to win the game, and I think it helped the fact that the Eagles' offense was non-existent. LaShawn McCoy, Nick Foles, nothing was going for them yesterday, and I was more sort of like disappointed with that after the start, to be honest with you, than I was in anything the 49ers necessarily did. They had some good individual plays which showed their talent. The Stevie Johnson catch was terrific, nice sort of few flush from the pocket from Kaepernick. It was a nice throw and a nice catch. He had moments like that where you saw, that's pretty impressive, but then you saw the same issues where they're obviously going on in the 49ers locker room at the moment. Heads looked down, nobody really communicating with Jim Harbaugh. He just looked like a spoiled child on the sideline, to be honest with you, screaming, and everybody doing their level best to pretend that they weren't ignoring him, but actually doing that. So for me, no, I was more disappointed and shocked with the Eagles' performance than necessarily anything the 49ers did.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The Eagles, really disappointed. Big stage for them because they would have almost finished the 49ers this season. They would have gone in the tank, I think. They just don't like their coach. You can tell, it's so obvious. He stands on his own. He always has done. He has that same ridiculous expression where he spreads his legs and hunches over, like in the Super Bowl, and is just screaming. And it looks pathetic and it looks dumb. And there's a reason why your brother, who looks cool and calm and collected, has a Super Bowl ring, and you right now do not have one. And the Eagles, they can't get the running game going. That's a real factor. But they've lost basically their whole offensive line. Peters is there, and Herriman's is there. Everyone's been moved around. I think they'll get it together, but it shows me that when push comes to shove at the playoffs, I think the Eagles have the talent defensively, or even offensively at times, outside the mastermind of Chip Kelly, to hang with some of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the Eagles are really sort of progressing, and they're getting there in terms of the team. I think they can go on a postseason run. Yeah, for the 49ers, the heads look really down, and, you can just sort of tell from watching the sideline, the sort of glimpses that you get of it when you're watching it on television, you can tell that there's problems there instantly, and it's dysfunctional. And I think there's every chance that they do make it to the playoffs, because I just think they have enough talent to get there. But I think they'll be one and done, and then I think Jim Harbaugh's gone. Okay,
the final thing I want to touch on, which really stood out to me this week, the Carolina Panthers gave up 37 to the Steelers last week. They gave up 38 to Baltimore this week. Do you have worries about this Carolina defense? They should be one of the best front sevens in the league. Obviously, they lost Greg Hardy, and they're trying to replace him with Addison and Ely and just trying to blend some different guys in. And we don't need to go into a whole discussion about whether Greg Hardy should be there or not. The fact is he's not there. But I can't tell whether I should be petrified about this team, because that defense should be one of the 5 best in the league, if not the best in the league. I think the front 7 is the best on its own. Or whether it's because the offense is stuttering and there's lots of 3 and outs and it puts a ton of pressure on the defense and their heads get down when they're out of the game and teams pile points on. Which way should I feel about this?
Yeah, I think, the last 2 games have surprised me in terms of the defense. I think, I don't think they've played very well, to be perfectly honest with you. I think it really has been that simple. I just don't think the last 2 games, I don't think they've closed down quickly to the football like they did. I think, that they've not read the quarterback particularly well. They certainly did against us with Ben Roethlisberger. You look at the pump fake TD he threw. I think offensively, they've got some issues. Obviously, Cam's still hurting a little bit. I think that's making life a little bit more difficult for him because he can't get outside the pocket. I think, they're still limited in terms of offensive weapons because they've got Kelvin Benjamin, who's had a good start to his rookie year, but he's really about the top and bottom of it, except that Greg Olsen is going to give you, a terrific tight end. He's going to give you lots of short yardage options, but they haven't really got sort of much else there, to be honest with you. And I think, yesterday was maybe a little bit in the making of Steve Smith. But for me, they just struggled in coverage and just haven't played well in the last 2 games defensively. I still think they're a top 3 defense because I don't think anything changes in 2 weeks like that. But I think, they've really got to lift themselves and get going now in terms of improving, defensively, because the offense, I think, until Cam's completely healthy, it's probably going to struggle to dominate games. So it's up to the defense to sort of continue on in the vein they were before they played the Steelers. I just think they've had 2 off games, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think a lot of it is not getting to the passer. They need to get to the passer non-stop because the back end is so poor because they invested so heavily in the front end.
Yeah.
You can't not get pressure. You'll just get picked apart, and they have been twice. And part of it is teams recognizing how good they are now and trying to get the ball up the hand quicker. And so now we need to see from them defensively to just try and adapt as you have to in this league and just realize teams are going to get the ball out quicker. What can we do differently now to attack these offenses who haven't sussed us out, because you can't just suss out great talent, but they are doing things to make it uncomfortable for us. I think we're just going to see a natural progression of the Panthers team.
The secondary was really poor against the Ravens yesterday. I mean, that fumble snap touchdown from Joe Flacco, and I forget the cornerback who was covering Steve Smith, and basically just got caught ball watching, didn't he? He totally lost his man when he realised that the snap had sort of been fumbled, and excellent reactions from Joe Flacco to pick it up and make that throw. For me, there's just a lot of mistakes there, and like you say, a lack of pass rush as well. They've got to get some pressure up front, especially to quarterbacks like Joe Flacco and Ben Roethlisberger, who in and out of the pocket will pick you apart. They can both put drives together and control the clock. When you're playing those kind of quarterbacks, you've got to get something going up front, especially if you've got a secondary like that.
Tom Roper from UKEndZone.com. He's one of our featured writers. Tom, hopefully you'll join me again at some point this week.
Absolutely.